am Francoise Lamotte here in Switzerland.
Hi, this is Dominik Muggli in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our podcast, The Digital Edge, brings our perspectives on the digital revolution with a cutting edge angle. Today, we're discussing digital transformation and, in particular, where to start. So, Francoise, how do you approach that when working with your customers?
Yes, I think this is a great question that everybody has. Where to start? I think we are bombarded by technology, news, examples of competitors doing great stuff, and it's always a question where to start. I think my answer is quite basic. We need to start from the beginning. What does it mean? It means that you need some fundamentals in place before you can do some cutting edge or sexy stuff. For example, if we talk about AI and data models, you can't do anything unless you have good data and data that is well organized, that is accurate, that is compliant. So unless you have those fundamentals, you have those foundations in place, you won't be able to go to the next level. But it's also the same if we think about software and application. We need to start, I think, from the customer pain points. We need to solve what matters for the customer before we can move to again more sophisticated stuff. I think there is probably a tendency to start from the end. And I think one of the things that I try to practice with my clients is to say, I know it's maybe less exciting, maybe more boring, maybe more under the radar, but you really need to start from the ground, from the beginning to put the foundations in place before you can actually move to more sophisticated applications. What do you think? What is your experience?
Yeah, I love the point you make about starting at the end, right? And this is so very common, from what I see. And sometimes I think it's a little bit driven by uh, the ease of access that we have to technology in our personal lives, right? Everybody runs around with a phone and you can get an app in 30 seconds, and the good apps you can really use in a few minutes, right? And so sometimes I think there's a sentiment in organizations also where, especially if you haven't experienced what digital transformation looks like, that this is something that takes 5 minutes and you're done, right? And in particular, that the technology piece is the centerpiece of what you're trying to achieve. And so, with that in mind, and like you said, like how far back do you go to really get people, the stakeholders that you have in this transformation on board? And to me, it's, the starting point, going far back enough that you have, number one, starting with leadership involvement, right? That the leadership is present, understanding, and supportive of whatever it is that the organization wants to achieve. But shortly thereafter, and I think this is also, again, sometimes overlooked and yet super, super critical, that you have the people in the organization being part of that, forming that change, right? Because they're ultimately ones that get the brunt of the change. They get the brunt of the work, and they're the ones that will have to do work differently at the end of the day. And so the starting point, to me is back where the people are impacted, right? Either by having to lead that change or being supportive of that change over this effectively indefinite journey.
Yeah, and I take your point about people and change management. So I think it's going back to how do we create a vision where people are excited about the transformation. So that's I think a very critical part. And as you
Yeah.
said, it starts from the leadership and it starts from the strategy, and the direction is very clear for everybody. It also means that every employee in the organization needs to understand what role they are going to play in the transformation. How can they be an active part of promoting digital assets? How they can innovate? how they can reinvent their role. And actually, there is a thing that always puzzles me. As you said, as individuals, as consumers, we are very tech savvy. I mean, we use our smartphone all the time, we use ChatGPT, etc. But when we come to the corporate world, we hear about skills gap and how we need to train people and how we need to embark them. And sometimes, maybe it's a bit controversial what I'm saying, but sometimes I feel like, how come that people who are so tech savvy outside of work have maybe difficulty to adopt the change within the organization? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? And I really think it's this accessibility to technology that we have, right? And how a lot of the products that we use in our daily personal lives are geared towards ease of use. You know, what I've seen in my time working with technology in business environments is that a lot of technology that is geared towards business use is missing the user experience factor oftentimes, right? Be it from a technical perspective, how to install something, to learning how to use software, to using it to change processes. And I think there's something in there, right? That many software companies still maybe don't take so seriously, that the user experience in enterprise software is a critical piece, because we're so accustomed that enterprise software is just not very good and requires, like you mentioned, training, right? I mean, there's training departments and people working on establishing training programs just to learn this software and that technology that gets implemented. So yeah, I think a big factor also in the capabilities of what enterprise software provides.
Yes, and I think now there is probably an evolution with, platforms and software that are much more accessible. I've seen an implementation of an ATS system, application tracking system in an
Hmm.
organization, and most of the parameters and the processes are actually in the hands of the user, the final users. So they are much more involved in the design of the solution. Actually, the software provider intervention is very limited. And I think probably, to your point, going in that direction of putting the tools in the hands of the user and not so much in a black box managed by IT is probably a good way also to embark people. I wanted to come back to where to start our initial question, and I think another point is the governance. You know,
Hmm.
putting in place a governance that is going to oversee the change, that is going to make decisions, and also is going to measure, the progress and the impact. I think if this is lacking, probably, we fall into traps with projects that take so much longer and are big holes of investments while
Yeah.
others are not moving. So I think digital transformation needs momentum, and you need to put a good governance in place to make sure that the organization is progressing.
Yeah.
uh, would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And it's just as you were speaking about that, kind of visualizing my experience in digital transformation, where organizations often undertake such initiatives, right? They want to have an eye on the future, and they want to progress into a state that is more competitive and enables more growth. But what's missing along the way is that the people that are engaged in the change already have a full day's worth of work, and then they're going to go and be asked to, like, oh, by the way, in addition to your work, oh, please also go and transform everything that you're doing and leverage this new technology and do everything different, right? And that's why that kind of what resonated with me, the governance aspect, truly understanding the impact, the priorities and the focus in the organization, up to and including personnel assignments, resource requirements, budgets, and the like. So excellent, excellent
I
points.
think this is critical. I mean, from my experience as a digital transformation officer or CIO, it's been always the case that we have a list of things we want to do that is at least 5 times the budget we have. Okay, so I think also we need to set expectations and work with the resources that are available. So yeah, I think that many things that needs to be put in place to enable a good start. So
Absolutely.
Dominique, what is your takeaway from our conversation?
Yeah, like I really love the points about starting at the beginning and not the end, right? That's kind of like what I, from your statement that I heard out, and it's a really great way of putting it, because to me the technology piece is literally the end piece and not the starting piece, right? I mean, yes, you have to have a really good understanding of what's out there and what's possible, right? It's super critical, but that's not the place to start, right? And it's really, to me, the people aspect and the involvement early on. What
Yeah.
about for you?
Yeah, I think the start might take a bit longer than expected because you need to put in place. I mean, need to have the strategy, you need to have the commitment of the leadership, you need to put in place the governance, the indicators.
Mm,
You need to make your market research. So maybe there is a bit of investment at the beginning, but I'm a true believer that you need to put those things in place to ensure that the rest of the progress and the transformation will be successful. Thank you so much, Dominique, for the discussion. So join us next time to discuss AI, very hot topic, and we will discuss about AI beyond Chat GPT. Thank you very much and have a good day.
looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. See you next time.